A lot of Miami Dolphins fans are hopeful that the team can trade down in the 2024 NFL draft and recover one of their missing third and fourth round draft picks. What does recent history tell us about what that would need to look like? That here today on a 10-year study of draft trades on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Cal Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase on last-minute tickets with the lowest prices guaranteed. Dolphins fans, we're going to continue working our way through the prospect spotlights that we have been doing here on the program over the course of the past week and a half or so. The NFL draft is 3 weeks from tonight, the first night, which means we are pedal to the metal in our preparations and covering draft prospects and getting ready to roll. But there's one thing that a lot of Dolphins fans, myself included, have been curious or inquiring or hopeful or optimistic for, and it's that the Dolphins can find more day 2 draft capital, or at the very least, very early day 3 draft capital in a draft that is generally perceived to be really strong through the first 100 or so picks. And after Miami's picks at 21 and 55, their next pick is 103 picks later at 158 as things are currently scheduled. And that weight is in the meat of where the talent lies in this year's class, thanks to NIL and thanks to the transfer portal and earning opportunities in college and opportunities to more rapidly change where you're playing and play faster in a new spot. The later stages of this draft class are underwhelming relative to the norms and the standard experience of picking on day 3. So that kind of puts Miami in a bit of a bind. They, of course, lost their third round pick as the part of the punishment from Roger Goodell for the alleged tanking and tampering allegations against the team. That cost the team a first round pick in 2023 and a third round pick in 2024. And then their fourth round pick is a part of the pick swap that was involved in the Bradley Chubb trade at the 2022 trade deadline. Miami will get a 2025 fifth round pick back as kind of the last exchange of assets in that trade deal. But they lose their fourth this year as a part of that swap with a year wait to get that extra pick back. So from Miami's perspective, you've got a really daunting wait. And a lot of Dolphins fans have said the trade back shouldn't be too hard. Get yourself an extra third round pick, get it back. You could still pick in the first round. So I wanted to do the study. I wanted to do the thing and look through and get a feel for what that actually does indeed look like, because that's sometimes these things are easier said than done. And sometimes these things are a little bit more daunting with the execution of it. So what I've done is I've looked at the last 10 years worth of NFL drafts, which makes me feel very old because when I first got started in draft work and in football media, it was in the 2014 NFL draft class was my first. So this is 10 years of drafts for me. So I'm a little in my feels about that, but I digress. That's my problem, not yours. And I looked at draft day trades that feature trades with a pick in the early 20s, going down the board, how far down they go, what they get back, what the trade value chart says about what you're able to get. And I've come across 14 trades with some interesting data trends, and that's what we're going to get into here today on the show. So just last year, Jacksonville did it twice with consecutive picks. Jacksonville went from 24 to 25 and picked up the 160th and 240th overall pick, courtesy of the New York Giants, and then took the Giants pick at 25 that they moved one spot back for and moved down another 2 spots with Buffalo and picked up pick 130. So they turned pick 24 in total through 2 trades into picks 130, 160, and 240. Jacksonville marginally won both of those trades from a trade value chart perspective which is like there's a couple different resources. There's one by Rich Hill. I think Harvard did one. The most famous one is the Jimmy Johnson model, which the first overall pick is worth 3,000 points, and the second overall pick is worth 2,600 points. And as you work your way down through, the picks are worth a fraction of the amount of possible points to illustrate value when you get into negotiation and go back and forth on how to value trade packages. You get into like the seventh round and everything's 1 point. Every pick is 1 point. But that first overall pick in the NFL draft is 3,000. By the time you get to 32, the 32nd overall pick, it's 590 points. So that really illustrates kind of the value, the descending value of how high up on the board you're picking. So in measuring both of those trades, Jacksonville marginally won them both. They got back 8 more points on the trade value chart, which is approximately worth the 208th pick in the draft in extra value with what they had or what they have versus what they originally had with 24th overall pick. In a perfect world, you can do that. You can incrementally move down and let the board continue to fall to you until you reach a point where you're not comfortable with what's going to happen anymore. But that's not always the case. New England, the previous year in 2022, took a big jump. They went from 21, where Miami's picking now, to 29. So they went down 8 spots with the Kansas City Chiefs, and they recouped, in addition to the 29th overall pick, they got 94 overall and 121. So they got a 3 and a 4 from the Chiefs. Late 3, late 4. That's probably the most attractive compensation you're going to find on this list for Miami. The challenge with that is at what opportunity cost, who are you trading away from at 21 that you would have some confidence you'd still be able to pick at 29 if you had a guy. Now, if you run out altogether and if there's no options that you like in that tier, in that range of the draft, then yeah, you can potentially slide down that far if you have somebody that's convicted and wants to come up for an individual player. Also in 2022, Baltimore went from 23 to 25 for pick 130. So that was effectively the same trade that happened with Jacksonville and Buffalo, happened with Baltimore and Buffalo the previous year in 2022. The only difference is they went down 2 spots from 23 to 25 instead of 25 to 27. We're going to get into some more of these trades, and then we're going to talk about the big picture trends, and then we're getting into potential clues based on what's already happened in 2024. That's coming up here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, there's no cap on that 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply, and now for some legal info. This claim is as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing includes risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the state of the first 3% match, and you must keep your Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. So 2021 had no trades kind of in this stratosphere. And again, I tried to keep this as narrow as possible. So this is draft night trades involving picks around 21st overall. The previous year in 2020 had the New England Patriots taking the biggest fallback of any team in the last 10 years. They went from 23 to 37, and they recouped pick 71 as a result. So they went down 14 spots for the 71st overall pick, which is an early 3. And in that exchange of draft capital, according to the trade value chart, New England walked away with 5 more points on the trade value chart after the trade than what they started with, which is about the value of the 216th pick, the 6th round pick. 2019 had 2 consecutive picks, Seattle and Baltimore. Seattle went from 21 to 30, and they only recouped 114 and 118. That is one of the bigger lost picks or trades in this 10-year snapshot is that deal between Seattle and Baltimore. Them going back, they lost the value of a 4th-round pick in doing so. But then Baltimore goes from 22 to 25 with Philadelphia, and they get 127 and 197. Now, because they didn't start as high up, they were 22 instead of 21, and they only went back half as far. Them getting a marginally comparative return meant that it was about a net even for both sides in 2019. Things get a little weird when you get out to like 18, 17, 16. Like the economics of it changed. You had teams that were trading back and losing value at a much higher rate. From 2019 to 2014, there were 8 trades that involved a trade back that did not involve a quarterback on draft night. And of those 8 trades, 6 of them, the team that traded back got back a lesser package than what they traded away, which is a really interesting, it's like a loss. So I kind of go into this a little bit on today's Substack post, which is going to post this evening on Touchdown Miami, which is my long form Miami Dolphins written content. And I have this study included in there, but you're looking to maximize value. And it seems like the economics of the draft have really ramped up in recent years as it's become a little bit more of an analytical mindset. And you're trying to maximize your value at every juncture. Teams going like 2019 and earlier, it felt like they were willing to sacrifice the value of the compensation in order to get appropriate value for a player. If they were in a hard spot, they didn't really like the board, or they knew somebody was going to be there that they wanted, they were more focused on getting appropriate value for the player that they picked as compared to maximizing the value of the trade compensation. And that is one of the number one trends that has swung the other way since 2019. So after 2019, the last 4 years of NFL drafts, every single trade that has happened, and we've outlined them all at this point, involved a team trading back and getting more than what they started with from a total value of package standpoint. That's the economic shift. And when you think about Chris Grier and how he operates, I would expect that to have to be the circumstances for Miami as well, where we're not going to compensate the value of this investment piece and take less than it is worth, because that's the bigger picture of the total investment you're missing the opportunity with. Now, ideally, you'd have a player or several players that you're head over heels with when you come on the board at 21. And that's the other side of the coin, is we're talking scarcity. If you don't like your options, you move down because you want to get better value for like the pick that you actually make. But the process of getting out of the pick until the past 4 years has not been dialed in on, you're coming up, you got to pay me the premium. I need to win the exchange. And that's been in recent years. And that falls in line with Chris Grier and making offers to players and be like, look, guys, we know what we think you're worth. This is what it is. We're not going to overpay you. Well, there's been times where they've been aggressive and given big assets and given big contracts. But you think about the free agency negotiations with Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt and how they ultimately land Teron Armstead. And that's kind of been the thing, is we want to find good value for every decision that we make. And that is a league-wide trend since 2020. You go back to 2018, Baltimore goes from 22 to 25, and they get 125 back. Now, Baltimore also sent 215, but that's only worth like 5 points. They lost 18 points in the trade value chart with that exchange. 2017, Seattle goes from 26 to 31, gets 95. That's a big win for Seattle. They netted about 20 points. So that was the other side of it, is instead of being close to break even, Atlanta really paid a premium to go up to 26. Then the following year, you had Washington go from 21 to 22, went down one spot for a future 6th round pick. That's it. You come back to 2023, a 1-pick swap required 2 picks in the current year, including a 5th round pick. So for 2016, for Washington to go down a spot and just totally take a bath and say, we'll take a 6 next year. That's not good value. They were more concerned about getting out of the spot. Detroit in 2015, they went from 23 to 28, And the best pick they got back was 143. They also got guard Manny Ramirez as a part of that trade. So if you want to have the valuation of the player at a certain stratosphere that would say, oh, well, we broke even on the trade because we got a player, so be it. But down 5 spots and your best pick you recoup is 143 overall. Arizona in 2014, they went from 20 to 27, and they got 91 because they started. This was the highest of any of the trades that were included in the study, 20. That's worth 850 points on the trade value chart. Go to 27, that's worth 680, and then even 91 is 136. They lost 34 points on the trade value chart. So before 2019, it was a lot less of maximizing the trade compensation, and it was more about we want to get appropriate value for whatever player we're going to pick, even if it comes at the cost. If we're going to lose value, we'll lose value in what we get in the trade. The fact that it's been operating differently now makes the conditions harder in my mind to optimize a trade package. And everybody's like, trade down and get a 3. Okay, well, knowing that teams are, executing these deals only if they get surplus value, it narrows the scope of a team that might be willing to give you that. Because now the conditions have to be even more pure for a team that wants to pay and lose the trade to come up and get a player. And if you're talking about getting a 3 as a result, some of these teams in the late 3s, these picks are worth 140 points, 150 points. 88th pick is just arbitrarily from Green Bay is 150 points. So if Green Bay gave you 25 and 88 to move up to 21, they're giving you 870 points versus Miami's pick is worth 800 points. So they would lose that deal by a greater margin than any trade that's happened involving a pick in the early 20s in the NFL draft since that Seattle pick in 2019. It's just a hard path. So there's one of two things has to happen. You either have to have a massive surplus of players that you're comfortable with, or you have to have no players that you're comfortable with. And even if you have no players, you can't put it off that way because teams are going to make you low ball offers, and you're either going to have to lose the value with the transaction or lose the value with the organic pick at 21 and taking a player you'd ideally not pick at 21. There's a trade that's happened already, and it's not a draft day trade, so it's not included in this study. But it is worth acknowledging. And then there's one other trade that has not been acknowledged yet with some fine print that we're going to talk about next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for all of your favorite events with Gametime. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier than before. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. I love the seat views. You get panoramic view from your seat and the all-in prices so that there's no surprise fees when you put the tickets into your cart and go to checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay guaranteed fit available only to U.S. customers. I left one trade off because it's the Goldilocks scenario, a team that's trading for a quarterback. And the trade happened in 2014. So I have it 10 years ago. Philadelphia went from 22 to 26. And they got pick 83 back. That's kind of if you're Miami, you don't have to move, but you don't even have to move back 5 spots. You'd get a third round pick in return. Philly netted plus 95 points on the trade value chart, which is by far, by 40 points, the highest outcome in either direction. It was the value that they netted the value of the 101st overall pick in the draft with the trade. And they managed to do this because they traded with Cleveland, who was coming up for a quarterback. Now, from Miami's standpoint, it's very difficult to envision a world in which this happens unless, say, hypothetically, Minnesota strikes out. If somehow Minnesota strikes out, because they have 11-23, they already did a deal with Houston, and that's what we're going to talk about in just a minute. But Minnesota has the pick at 23. They're probably realistically the only team behind Miami for the rest of the first round that you could realistically say would be in play for a quarterback. And even you get into the early second round, if Miami were to do the Patriots-Chargers trade and go from 21 to 30 or 23 to 27, whatever it was, and you're going to get outside the first round altogether, just look at the first round pick or the early second round picks. Carolina, Bryce Young in the first round last year. New England currently has the third overall pick. And even if they trade out of 3 and go a different direction, would you want to play ball with New England to set them up with a quarterback? That's a question they would have to answer for themselves. Miami has not shied away from doing business with New England in the past. That's neither here nor there. Arizona has Kyler Murray. Washington has the second overall pick. They pick again at 36. The Chargers at 37. They, of course, have Justin Herbert. The Titans at 38. They seem intent on building around Will Levis. Carolina again at 39. Washington again at 40. Green Bay at 41. Houston 42. Atlanta 43. Like Vegas at 44 is kind of the next stop on the train. So it's Minnesota 23, assuming they strike out at 11 or in their efforts to get up and draft whatever quarterback that they want. Potentially New England if they pass, and then the Raiders at 44. Any one of those scenarios, however, if there is a quarterback that they would be over the moon for, and they start climbing over each other, and they happen to get antsy when Miami gets on the clock, you could put them through the cleaners, because that's anytime you're charging for a quarterback trade and you know it because it's happening on draft night, you take advantage of that. Is that a likely scenario? No, it's not. So please don't comment. It never happened. I know it's very unlikely, but we're acknowledging all the scenarios here. But how Minnesota got 23 is where it's interesting, because Minnesota traded up to 23 from 42 with the Houston Texans. And the cost was 42 and a future second round pick in 2025. The Texans have already parlayed that pick into Stephon Diggs. But from a trade value chart perspective, 23 is worth 760 points. And the pick at 42 is worth 480 points. So a future 2, usually you deduct a bit of the value of the pick because you have to wait 12 months to cash it in. They didn't get a ton. Houston didn't for that first round pick. I think it ages better when you consider they've parlayed it into Stephon Diggs with a quarterback on a rookie contract. But a reduced value there, I think if you added up the numbers, even if you have the trade value chart, like say you had the same pick in the second round and the same pick in the third round, right? And you take a round value off the future second round pick. 1 round later, a 1 round discount off of pick 42, if they had the same pick, would be 220 points. That would mean it was 700 points total versus 760. So Houston trading down took a 60-point loss in theory, although they're betting on some things being in their favor, and they obviously have already parlayed that into a veteran player. Is that a clue that trading down in this year is going to be more difficult because of the value of the first 50 picks or so? I think maybe. And if that's the case, that will even further narrow that road for Miami to trade down. But in just to recap, the following trades, there's been 14. The following trades netted a third-round pick in trade downs in the last 10 years of the NFL draft. The New England trade in 2022 with Kansas City, they went from 21 to 29. The New England trade with the Chargers in 2020, they went from 23 to 37. The Seattle trade with Atlanta in 2017, they went from 26 to 31 and got 95. The Seattle trade with Denver in 2016, they went from 26 to 31 and got 94. And then the Arizona trade in 2014, they went from 20 to 27 and got picked 91. And then, of course, the Johnny Manziel quarterback trade. So it's the average, it's about 50% of the time, but those drops, like how far down the board you go if there's not a quarterback involved, is 7 spots, 5 spots, 5 spots. And that's happening at 26 versus 21, 8 spots. So if you're wanting Miami to recoup a 3, get mentally prepared. Like, it's going to have to probably be after 26. And at that stage, what does the board look like? And are you comfortable with moving away from those players at 21 to get to it? You have to wait and see how the board falls. That's the fascinating part. Now, if you walk away and you move down a few spots and you pick up a 4, you still probably feel really good about it, because now you have what you're expecting is a couple compensatory 3s next year waiting for you. You have the extra 5 next year. You have the 4 that you'd be adding in a trade back scenario. You could potentially finesse your way up the board a little bit and get into the early 4th round, which maybe you catch a guy that falls a little bit. Like, there's some fallout that could happen. But a lot of this is wait and see. But just calibrate your expectations accordingly. The 10-year study of trade backs on draft night in the NFL draft suggests that if you want a 3rd round pick, you got to move back 6, 7 spots. So you're talking 27, 28, Detroit at 29, Baltimore at 30. That's kind of the stratosphere you'd have to be willing to go to. Are you willing to do it? Depends on how the board breaks, but at least you know now what it would have to look like. I'm Kyle Krabs. That is going to do it for us here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. We'll be back later today with some prospect conversation. Looking forward to that. You find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Fins up.